get is y'all don't know anything about racing. This is true. You're right. You're in the wrong show.
Yeah.
You're watching the wrong show if you want to hear like super engineer stuff.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Hitting the Apex, joined by Evan. Evan, how's it going?
Good. Looks like our team can finally start a race.
Yeah, start and finish for Oscar. He was nearly there. As your family trickles into the chat, I don't know if this is in reference to something or...
I think she just wanted us to get started.
Well, we did. We jumped the gun. You know, we got. They're assessing our penalties right now because we started a few minutes early. But we got to make up for the race starting late, which is a rarity because one of the cool things. Obviously, with nothing anyone can do this support race out of a massive accident. They couldn't get the barrier repaired in time. But one of the things, in most sports, they publish a time that starts as kind of BS. There's like always pregame this and that and all that, and it starts like 10. Whatever, a certain amount of minutes after the actual published time. F1, because they have all that. It used to be Rolex, now so they have a watch sponsorship. They tick it over to the exact time and they get it rolling. But honestly, what was an eventful weekend. This time there was none of that. So we do have what there was a series of predictions from us. So you had George Russell winning, Hamilton second, Antonelli third. 2 McLarens finish in the top 10. Evan, you would have gotten away with 2 McLarens finishing in the top 5, but
I would have.
I had Hamilton, Antonelli, Leclerc. Leclerc did finish third. I had George Russell DNF. That didn't happen. Although, as we'll get into this, we did get into the return of whiny boy George Russell.
We did.
he returned.
We got whiny boy almost everybody this week. There was so many people complaining about this.
I do want to specifically address what George Russell said. And then Morgan had George Russell, Kimi, and Leclerc, and Max top 5. Max finished 8th. That car stinks. So I guess kind of start things off here. I guess what were your overall takeaways from that race? And I'm going to put the order finish up while you talk.
I think overall, it was the most competitive race we've seen so far this year. There was racing all the way up and down the field. There was passes all the way up and down the field. There was a big accident, obviously, and I'm sure that we'll get to that at some point. But we saw the Mercedes kind of do Mercedes things where they fall back in the beginning of the race because the starts of the other teams were just ahead of them. We saw some amazing passes. Piastri, going around, I think it was Leclerc or Russell, one of them. He went around one of them on the outside into turn 1 and 2, which was incredible. There was a couple other really good passes throughout the race, at different areas that we don't see a lot of. But then, there was kind of the predictable parts, and we talked about this a little bit before the show started, where it was, people would make a pass to that final chicane and then get passed right again going down the front straight with the overtake mode because of the way that these cars have to harvest and utilize their battery percentage and use the overtake button and stuff like that. So, I think that overall this was a much more competitive race than a lot of the other or the last 2 races that we've seen, whether it be in Australia or in China. So in that sense, it was a good race overall. You could see a lot of these drivers defend more and that really became the strategy of this race in Formula One, or maybe even this this concept of Formula One. This rule set is that it's going to be a lot more defensive. It's going to be a lot more utilizing the battery. Obviously we talked about that in nauseum, but um, overall, I think this race was a lot better than what we saw in Australia, and a lot better as well as what we saw in China.
Yeah, I agree. I guess, but my only concern is it seems like every with this current set of regulations, every track has a way to kind of game the system based on how you charge and deploy your battery, and so you get these different flavors of that, but they're all similar from the standpoint of it's still just screwing with the battery and figure out when to lift, when to charge it. And yeah, some of the drivers had some pointed comments about it. In this race, like you said, I felt like the racing was actually a little bit better in this race versus the previous two, but there's still, once the teams figure out this is where we want to charge, this is where we want to deploy, this is the strategic way to do that, to, like you said, avoid getting overtaken or to overtake, it does kind of take some of the mystery out of it, some of the skill out of it. Because, I mean, I did see a comment, which I think is obviously true as well, where, we're not that far removed from everyone complaining that there's no passing. The sport stinks now, no one can overtake, and now it's like it's too easy to pass. So they haven't found that happy medium yet. But I still am very wary about doing major rule changes in the middle of the season when one team has clearly gotten the rules better, gotten adjusted to them better, and is way ahead. And I think it artificially does remove some of their advantage, which I don't think is fair, because they all have the same opportunities to build the car, and just changing their rules to regardless of what the reason is, does impact the team, which is Mercedes, that clearly is ahead. With that said, this is not great racing when you're kind of like, well, we know they're going to overtake, and then they're going to give the place back up a few corners later, because after you overtake in that zone, you're going to lose your battery. And it's rough. And you mentioned the crash. I guess we could probably go that, because that was actually so good. Yeah, you summarized the main race well. And once again, I don't know what it is with these Mercedes, but we should start with Antonelli put it on a pole.
Yeah.
And so he did out qualify his whiny teammate, and then just like in every race, it feels that those cars, for whatever reason, just have no getaway. And several of the other teams, most notably Ferrari, but also to a lesser extent McLaren, have an excellent off the line speed. So yeah, the Mercedes just got eaten up. Antonelli got a worse start, ended up behind Russell and several other drivers. But yeah, ended up being Piastri out front controlling the race, and then he pitted to avoid an undercut, because we've all very quickly come back to full circle. Like, you want the track position because overtaking is really hard because of the battery. So he essentially had the track position. Russell eventually came out right behind him, and then there was a safety car immediately after Russell came out of the pits, which allowed a free pit for Antonelli that won him the race. Piastri ended up second. But Russell ended up, getting overtaken by Leclerc too at the next restart, because again, these cars don't start well, and then never was able to get the spot back. So, with that said, let's talk about so that's kind of the order of events, and then that's how we end up winning. But I think it is worth noting he was the fastest car in qualifying. Yeah, he got luck during the race, but over the course of the weekend, I mean, second weekend in a row, he's been the better of the Mercedes drivers overall. And that's an important point. But yeah, the crash. What was your take on that? Because I think everyone's immediately pointing to that crash was caused directly by the way the regulations are set up. It's an extreme version of what was happening towards the end of the laps, which is it makes sense for you to charge your battery on the racing line in the corners and force the cars behind you, if they're going to go around, to deploy their battery to do it, because when you accelerate, it starts to just drain your battery.
Yeah.
And that way you can pass back. And that's what I think it was Colapinto was doing when Behrman came storming around the corner and saw basically a stationary, in his view, stationary, in a normal person's view, going very, very fast, but for a Formula 1 stationary looking car, took evasive action and ended up in a very heavy crash in the wall. I guess what was your take on that? Is there a driver responsibility here as well? Because everyone seems to be straight rules fault, not Behrman's fault. What's your take on this?
I mean, I do think that there is somewhat of a driver's responsibility there. You got to be aware of the situation of all the cars that are around you. From what I've surmised or what I've seen of the situation, it was Colapinto was actually harvesting. So he was charging the battery and uh, Berman was deploying, so he was using the overtake. So it's like you got one driver basically using the minimum amount of power possible to try to charge the battery, while the other guy's using the most amount of power possible by deploying the battery, and that's what really caused that discrepancy in speed. I mean, we look at it like these guys were flying. It was a 25 mile per hour difference. Do 25 miles per hour more than the guy next to you on the turnpike, and you'll see how big of a difference that is. It's a significant difference, and these cars aren't made to they're the best handling cars in the world, yes, but to make a direction change that quickly with that much downforce and in that split second amount of time, it's no wonder he went off the road the way he did. I think that again, we talk about there needs to be some type of change in this situation to where you don't need to do stuff like that to be able to have a competitive lap. You won't need to recharge your battery at that level and be that much slower than everybody else just to be able to compete with everybody. We're talking the difference between in other racing terms like an LMP1 car to a GT3 car, in speed differential. The way that those cars came up to them or the way that they came up to each other was almost faster than you see the prototype cars in Le Mans past the GT3 cars going down the Mulsanne straight. I mean, so realistically, there has to be something that they figure out that they adjust in the rule set to allow them to not need to use so much of this harvesting, in order to be able to complete a whole lap without completely destroying your battery or completely using up your battery multiple times, as well as the drivers need to be more aware of what's going on around them. I say that with also the caveat of these drivers have the race engineers that are with them that are in their ear 24/7. Where was his race engineer to say, hey, you got a car ahead of you, harvesting, be prepared, be prepared for the patch. You got Colapinto ahead of you 3.5 seconds or 2.5 seconds or whatever that he's harvesting. Keep your eye out for that, because that's also another thing that I think should have been mentioned in this whole situation. Is there's kind of a responsibility for your race engineer to kind of give you a heads up on situations like that as well. In NASCAR, it's a little bit easier. They have their spotters who are able to see everything that's going on the track, but essentially, you have the same type of thing going on there. There's plenty of views and plenty of onboard cameras that these race engineers know where every single car is at all times and what they're doing.
Yeah, I think it's just, I think this is a point that Morgan's making. There are cost gaps too, so where do you deploy your money? And obviously, Haas doesn't have a lot to begin with, but there's limits to what you can pay people. So you got to cut corners somewhere, and some of that is in headcount staff. I think it's somewhat of an avoidable crash. And I also think, obviously, I'm not a Formula 1 driver or anything close to that, but I feel like he could have controlled the car
really
better.
I didn't know that. I thought you
look, I'm breaking news here, Evan. It's the late night show, so we got to break news to keep people interested. No, but I felt like he could have controlled the car. When he saw, I think he overreacted to, because Colapinto also, we should point out, drifted off the racing a little bit and didn't stick exactly to it, but there was plenty of room to go around him without going into the gravel and losing the car. And I feel like Behrman just kind of overreacted a little, was surprised and kind of startled and overreacted to it. And, these cars at that speed, slight jerk of the wheel, the thing just goes. But Yeah, I agree. Except there's no weird spots to slow down anymore because it's wherever you want to charge your battery. So you could sit on these people. They're slowing down the straights. Like this is this is this is the business that F1 has chosen for itself this year. They've decided that the most important thing is to do 50-50 gas and electric, and so they are doing it come hell or high water. These are the consequences of those decisions. Whether or not you like it or not, these are all directly related to the rule set. It's part of the bargain you make. I know a lot. I know there is a school of thought, and the racing is more competitive. Although I bet people don't like the reason it's more competitive, and yeah, I mean you can argue that hey, look, we're getting a lot more overtakes. We got to get rid of like DRS, which was kind of a faux way to give the car behind more pace, and they couldn't overtake on merit. So, and now they can overtake without that. So, I mean, you can definitely justify some of this, but the consequences are you're gonna people just randomly in the lap going slow because they have to charge up. I mean, that's the reality.
Yeah. But hopefully, like
All
like I
right.
said, it won't be a one of those, or it won't be a necessity much longer. Hopefully, they will in this month look at these rules and regulations and see what they can do to adjust them or tweak them or change stuff. Hopefully
Yeah,
not a
I read
lot,
a
but
couple
just
of
enough to
things.
where it gets better.
Yeah, well, we'll discuss that at the end on whether we think there will actually be changes, and then I did read a few things on things that could potentially be used to do that. So, all right, Evan, who's your driver of the day here?
Piastri, 110% Piastri. Piastri was my driver of the day by far. The start that he had, the way that he was commanding
Well,
that race.
that he had a start
Yeah,
is
the
well, check what.
yeah, and we talked about last week about what was or who were the teams that I was looking at to looking at going into this race, and one of them was McLaren to see if they could bounce back from the weekend that they had in China, where both of the drivers didn't start. Piastri didn't start in Australia, his home race. Granted because of a mistake that he made by himself, but either way, he didn't start that. And to have this type of bounce back to come out and essentially, I would almost say dominate the race if it wasn't for that if it wasn't for the Berman Colapinto crash. He had the potential to be ahead and win that race, just because he was somebody who he was defending well, he was racing well, he was able to use the deployment in the proper places. Morgan says there the yellow flag robbed him, but there was still a chance Kimi was going to catch him. So it's one of those situations. I think that if you had Piastri up front and Antonelli was coming up behind him towards the end of the race, it was gonna be close. But I don't know that he would have been able to pass him. I don't know that he would have been able to get through just because of how well Piastri was defending throughout that entire race. He was doing a great job of making sure that Russell was behind him, Leclerc stayed behind him, whoever it was that was attacking him stayed in those positions and didn't get past him. And that is one of the things that I think is going to be crucial in this formula, in this rule set, if they don't make too drastic changes, is your ability to be able to defend and utilize those tools to be able to keep people not only to get past them but to keep them behind you. And Piastri really showed that he did a great job in that this week, and he also did a good job in qualifying. I think he qualified third, if I'm not mistaken, and then Lando was like fifth
Yeah,
or sixth or something like that.
yeah, I think
So
so.
so he had a great qualifying, and it shows that these McLarens can really put a fight up against these Ferraris and at some points even these Mercedes.
Yeah, I thought he had an outstanding race. Like you said, he pretty quickly got into a the drivers often talk about getting in a rhythm. He got into that rhythm of how and when to deploy his battery, and eventually, like Russell was overtook him. He retook a couple of times, and Russell had to drop back because Piastri was out driving him. And
Yeah.
obviously, the safety car, then Piastri pit first, Russell after him, then the safety car. Um,
How about you?
I'll
Who's your
also give a
driver
shout.
today?
Yeah, I mean, Piastri, I think, is the obvious answer. I give a shout out to Antonelli as well.
Yeah.
Morgan is pointing this out. Yeah, the it was the safety car, not yellow, that kind of robbed Oscar what looks like the win. But one of the things that kind of got lost a little bit because obviously everyone that pit earlier kind of got screwed by the safety car. It allowed Antonelli to kind of end up in front. Hamilton was too far back to fully take advantage, but it did allow because he was the other kind of the front runner teams that didn't pit. But it did allow Antonelli to obviously get the free pit stop and come out in front. But I think, and then obviously the focus then shifted to, well, George Russell because he'd pit like literally worst time
Right
ever,
before.
Yeah, he's coming out of the pits and then like immediately does like one corner. They're like yellow flag, and then they go, oh, that's a safety car, and he's crap.
I thought it was like as he was coming into the pits, like, and then he had the call on the radio, like really, like right now, this is when it's good. Like he was literally like
Yeah,
you're playing.
yeah,
It was,
but I will say this to Morgan's point. One of the reasons that because everyone's like, why would they pit? Like as if they have, if it's their clairvoyant and they knew a safety car was coming. Obviously, they wouldn't have pit him if they knew that. But
yeah,
like, what was the advantage? The reason they had to pit him is Antonelli was running him down,
yeah,
and they were a few laps from having to either to do whatever the hell the Mercedes equivalent of papaya rules is, and they're like, forget that, we're just going to pit the lead car because
yeah,
they couldn't pit Kimi because he would have undercut.
exactly.
Because there was a powerful undercut here, and then George would have pit and come out behind him. So they had to pit him soon, or Kimi was going to be on his gearbox, and then what do you do? Because the bottom line for this weekend is Kimi was the faster driver over the weekend.
I don't know
shout
how
out to him,
strong.
too.
I don't know how strong the undercut was this weekend. Like I don't know if it was just me, but like you remember Norris and Leclerc were running with each other, and they pretty much pitted. Like Norris pitted first. He was the first. He was the first of the top 5 drivers, the top 6 drivers to pit, and we all thought, okay, he's going to undercut Leclerc because Leclerc was the driver that was right in front of him. I think Russell was behind him at this point, or maybe Russell was up in like third ahead of Leclerc. But it was like Lando was right with Leclerc. Like they were, wasn't it like Leclerc, Russell, and Antonelli, or Leclerc, Norris, and Antonelli? Is like that was the pack, and then it was Piastri and Russell up ahead of him, or something like that. There was like Mercedes, a Ferrari, and a McLaren. And then it was like Antonelli and Piastri up ahead, or no, it was like Russell and Piastri up ahead. It was Piastri, then Russell, and then, like I said. So, anyways, Lando was the first one to pit in that situation. And we all thought, okay, he's trying to cover off Leclerc because, Antonelli's going to get past him. He's got the faster car, but, he's trying to cover off Leclerc and be able to undercut Leclerc. And then Leclerc came out and he was still ahead of him. And he was, I think even a little bit further ahead of him. I don't know if that was just a bad outlap by Lando or a bad couple first laps by Lando. But
actually, what it was is, and you saw this with several of the drivers, you said there was a little bit of a delayed reaction because those hards were taking a little bit of time to
fire.
You'd see like 2 laps, and then you'd start seeing purple.
Yeah.
From the pit, so. It wasn't an immediate undercut, but Leclerc, they reacted quickly and immediately pit to cover off.
Yeah.
So it was before Lando, but then by the time he came out, and then you saw Lando go purple.
Yeah.
And then Leclerc took it, and then so yeah, I guess theoretically they could have pit Russell, they could have put Antonelli in 1 lap, but again, Antonelli's also going faster, so there's no guarantee George would have come out in front of him. So, yeah. And then then you would have essentially undercut yourself. Then what do you give the plates back? So they let George pit, and then I'm sure Kimi was going to come in the next lap, except, well, he did come in the next lap, but in very different conditions with the safety car. So, but I thought Kimi drove an excellent race. What about your disappointment of the weekend?
I mean, I'm kind of torn between Max and Russell. I think Russell had an opportunity to come out and win this race, and then with all his kind of whining and complaining and all that, after everything happened, Especially after the safety car, like we were talking about, and then after the race. I think we could put him there, but then you got Verstappen, who essentially went out there and told the FIA, through the media that, hey, if things aren't changing anytime soon, there might not be a Max Verstappen in Formula One. His comments came out saying there's other things that he'd like to pursue and stuff like that, and it's not even just because this car is bad, or the team built a bad car. It's because he just doesn't like the regulations. He doesn't like the way the direction that Formula One is going. So, I think that, him coming out and making those comments, is a really big statement, but I kind of don't like it. You got to wait a little bit for this. You got to let the chips fall a little bit. Let them work into this rules, and let them adjust things around, and then make decisions or calls like that. But that, and on top of that, we're talking about Max Verstappen. We talked about, for the past few years, you could put him in any car and he's gonna bring that thing up in the top 5, top 3 podium positions. That it's not the car, it's him. He's the reason why those Red Bulls have been so fast for so long, and that's just not the case. I think we're learning that this is, same thing like a Tom Brady and Belichick situation. As soon as Belichick lost, the best quarterback in the history of the NFL, he started regressing, and now look at where he's at in college. Coaching a team that can barely wins any games in the ACC. So, it's an interesting situation. I'm gonna go with Verstappen for my choice as disappointment of the day. He's dominated at Suzuka for so many years, and to see him come out like this, I'm not happy about it.
I feel like you knew Carly was going to show up, and you just went for it. I think. Look, I think it's look. I actually disagreed a little bit with what you said to actually make Max look a little worse. Then I disagreed a little bit that I think will make him look a little bit better. I actually think if Red Bull had the fastest car, if they had the Mercedes, he wouldn't care.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be, no, I can't believe we have to lift and coast, and I'll be like, this is great, I'm winning. I think it's both. That their car stinks, relatively speaking. It's clearly the 4th best at best.
Maybe even 5th best.
Yeah, it's a midfield car, right? And that is definitely, I think, coloring a lot of his disdain for this rule set. To your point, yeah. I mean, we know when they do radical car changes, not the first time, right? Remember all the curve stuff and all, like, I mean, if you watch a race from 10 years ago, just look at the graphics on the screen, like, what the hell is this? Because you forgot all the, like, battery on the screen and the deployment, all this stuff that these things evolve. But the reason he doesn't like the drive, I think this style does not suit his driving style, so he hates that. The car stinks, he hates that. And I think he's just, and I also don't think, this is even, I think, towards the left. I don't think he really loves being in Formula One, period. I think he was raised to be in Formula One by his father, a Formula One driver, and he's kind of, I mean, he can go the route of trying to break every longevity record. Other than that, he's accomplished everything you'd ever wanted to in Formula One. And, I think when he does, I mean, yes, but Red Bull's had their issues. Maybe that analogy holds up. Red Bull's hands are not clean. But I'm wondering,
if you're not cheating, you're not trying.
True. Yeah, it is Formula One. We talked about this last week. Week off between races, most of the drivers unwind, let me go sit on island. He's like, I'm gonna go drive something else I actually want to be driving.
Yeah.
And we all know he's really big into the sim racing. I think he enjoys doing all of that stuff more than driving the Formula One car, even before this generation. So he's kind of like, why am I even here? I hate this. I don't like this. I don't like traveling all over the world and driving this car I don't like and dealing with the F1 circus. And I'd rather fart around on my sim racer and yeah, go drive performance sports cars instead and have fun with it than doing this. And yeah, he's got nothing left. I mean, he's basically, unless he's going for, Hamilton and Schumacher's record, that's kind of the only thing left to do. But you got to be around a long time to do that. And if this generation of car is not for him, was that 5 years before? I mean, we saw that, right? Vettel was the one that actually, was going to break Schumacher's record, and then ended up in cars that weren't race winning worthy, and never won another championship. And Hamilton's one of the few drivers we've seen adapt to just different version after different version after different version.
Yeah, it was the same thing with Alonso. We all thought Alonso was just going to keep on winning too, and he just couldn't.
Yeah, and so if Max is sitting there thinking, my next 5 years are going to be this, screw this. I'm getting the hell out of here. I don't need this. I've got so much hardware. I don't know what to do with it.
He could essentially call up any race team on any, in any type of racing, across every discipline and say, hey, you got a seat for me, and they'll make a seat for him. Which is insane to think about, but it's like, legitimately, if Formula One isn't racing the same weekend as Le Mans this year, Max Verstappen could call any one of the teams that are there and say, hey, put me in a seat, and they'll say, no problem. Yep. Here you go. Please enjoy.
Absolutely. And I think that's kind of part of what he doesn't need this. So I think that's part of his frustration is when it's not just that his car is slow, he doesn't like the way that it drives or the way this generation of car drives. I don't need this. So I will defend him a little bit in that I don't think he really wanted to be here in the first place.
Yeah.
And this just tipped him over. And I got to go with my man, George Russell here. I mean, I'd spent a lot of time eating crow, and I still probably will because he's still probably, we're going at the standings, he's still probably going to win the championship over the course of the season. But I talked about how he's matured. He's had like a number one driver. And I think he's going to, and when I picked him to win the championship this year, I was like, my bad. He grew in a way I didn't expect him to. Boy, did it all come back this week. I mean, he's the one, so he did not get screwed by the safety car. He's the one who could not overtake Oscar. One of the reasons Kimi was running him down is because he could not get first place.
Yeah.
And Piastri, obviously on raw pace, the McLaren is not faster than Mercedes, so Kimi's just taking chunks of time out of him while he's stuck by Oscar because he can't overtake. And then obviously, any driver would be pissed about like just the timing of the bad luck that he had with the safety car. But then after the race to come out and say he would have won if it wasn't for the safety car. Bro, you were never in first.
Yeah.
How would you have won? Piastri would have won if it wasn't for the safety car, or if Kimi overtook him. There's no universe George Russell was going to win because he couldn't overtake anyone. He couldn't overtake Leclerc. He finished fourth.
Yeah.
Like I don't know what I understand that mentality of always thinking you're going to win or you can win, but man, it's been a while since we'd seen George Russell's childlike petulance, and it came roaring back this week. So he is man. I thought he turned a corner on that type of stuff, but it was just, oh, woe is me, I'm the victim here. I'm like, man, you were never winning that race. You overtake.
He's like that one entitled like prince or king that you see that shouldn't. He reminds me of what's the young king that from the House of not House of Dragons, the other one, the Game of Thrones. What's Joffrey? The young? He reminds me of Joffrey, where it's like he didn't really deserve to be on the throne. He didn't really deserve to be up there, but he's there, and he just whines about everything. It's kind of how Joffrey was. He's up there complaining, being evil, being whining about every single thing that happens. And this is him getting back to that. This is him showing that again. He's been proclaimed as the number one driver this year, as the driver who's the favorite to win. And now what? Antonelli's faster. Two out of the three races, Antonelli has gotten the fastest lap of the race. At the end of this race, Antonelli pulled something that we haven't seen since Max Verstappen was dominating a few years ago, which is his race director said, "It's okay, calm down, relax, slow down." Antonelli said, "Okay, fastest lap of the race." Like I mean, come on. And I'm sorry, you can't tell me that there's a single person outside of maybe George Russell's biggest fans that aren't pulling for Antonelli to be the number one driver on this team right now. You can't. Antonelli. Antonelli has the story. He's a young kid. He's likable. He's always smiling. Everything to him is like, oh my god, I just won, yay! And it's like even when George Russell is leading the race, or even when he won in Australia, it was just like, okay guys, cool, thanks, appreciate it, we won. It was just like he's trying to just show that aura of been there, done that, and it's like, first of all, you haven't been there and done that. You've been kind of a laughing stock of driver for a lot of your tenure in Formula One, as somebody who wrecks or makes a bad decision or does something wrong. You've been great at qualifying your entire career, but can't really put it all together. You've been the backup driver or the number one or number two driver for the majority of your career in Mercedes. Now you're technically the number one driver for what, a year, and now somebody else is taking over. And I'm sorry, but I'm pulling for Antonelli to dominate this year over Russell, to keep on beating him on track and on the in the qualifying. I think Antonelli has that capability, and Russell, we're just going to keep on seeing more of this, this petulant childlike attitude from him, moving forward.
Yeah, and Mercedes famously does not do team orders, which we saw with Nico and Lewis running into each other repeatedly. Just let this go. So if he's expecting an assist from the engineering side of the house, it ain't coming. He's got to beat Antonelli on pace.
Yep.
Speaking of which, Antonelli is your leader in the driver standings.
Youngest one ever.
Youngest one ever. He's taken over. He's 9 points, which is a full more than one race. If they finish first and second, clear of George Russell. Leclerc is not too far behind. And Hamilton not too far behind him. Obviously, it's been 3 races, so it's hard to open that big gap. But yeah, interesting. If Russell doesn't get his stuff together, Anton's going to pull a bit of a gap here, and it's very hard to close gaps when your rival is at least going to finish second, all things being equal. That's kind of where it's at. There's been a few oddities that have caused that to not happen this year for these two guys, but eventually, the reliability will come good, and all of that'll happen, and you're going to see both the Mercedes. I'm assuming at some point they're going to fix their issues where they drive in reverse when the lights go out, and there will be a lot more straight shot between the two of them, and it's hard to make up points when you're battling a teammate for first and second every race, which is when all the crashing stuff starts happening. So. Russell's kind of run himself in a little bit of trouble here.
I have a legitimate question for you.
Mm-hmm.
How much is Ferrari kicking themselves for betting on getting Hamilton and not going after somebody young like an Antonelli? Antonelli's from Italy. We all, we've seen he's from, Imola, that area, the Emilia Romagna area. Not far from the Ferrari factory. Like, Ferrari went out the year before they got Hamilton and made a push to get Hamilton. Toto Wolff went out and said, I'm going to go out and find a young, talented driver. Antonelli was on the radar, and Antonelli's been on a lot of people's radar for many years through karting and through, the other series and stuff like that. How much is Ferrari kicking themselves for not going after him? Because could you imagine if he was doing this in a Ferrari as an Italian driver?
In the Ferrari though, and I think he wouldn't be doing this because he's got the car under him, right? I mean, So I don't think they're kicking themselves at all. Also, they
Yeah.
needed that. They need that. They needed. We gotta remember. Like, it's funny how quickly we've all become accustomed to Ferrari kind of being largely competent.
Hmm.
They needed that professionalism that Hamilton brings with him because that team was a clown show. And
Yeah.
obviously Fred Vasseur gets a lot of credit for that too. Like, they brought him into, hey, we gotta tighten up over here. This is embarrassing, right? And they
Yeah.
went outside of like their factory to finally hire like a, you know, and they got Hamilton there also to bring some professionalism. I think that's worked, and he's pushed. That last generation of cars wasn't the best for him, but he's pushing Leclerc. Now they're trading. They've spent every single race. There's been a battle between the two of them. Sometimes
Yeah.
Leclerc wins it, sometimes Hamilton does. So is Antonelli a better driver than Leclerc right now? I don't know. He's got a much better car.
Yeah.
So I don't know that he would necessarily be performing the way Hamilton is. So no, I don't think they regret it at all. Also, they're Ferrari. They can go buy him later.
Yeah. This is true.
If they went,
And
let's say Hamilton retired after this year or whatever, if they go to Antonelli and be like, you want to come here? Yeah, sure. But
so
I
to
think that's the
Morgan's
one
point,
thing, regardless of how dysfunctional Ferrari looks at times, maybe a lot of times, and regardless of their overall lack of success, given the size of the brand, they're still Ferrari, and no one turns Ferrari down. Like we saw, Sainz essentially ruined his career. He could have stayed up with McLaren and competed for a World Drivers' Championship last year. Maybe won the damn thing.
yeah.
But Ferrari called. You got to go to Ferrari. Hamilton did the same thing. They called, and he left like the team he had been with for a decade, won all those championships. It's Ferrari. Like, I think I think Ferrari knows, like, they can do whatever they want because they can always make a phone call and get any driver they want because it's Ferrari.
Yeah. And I think, Morgan also makes a good point in the chat saying, I feel like Bierman is Ferrari's Kimi. That's going to be interesting because, when Hamilton does decide to hang it up, you can see that there's kind of that delineation in those top three teams where you have Antonelli as the really young up and coming driver, Russell as now the established driver, Leclerc and Russell and Norris are kind of all three in that same generation of drivers. And then Piastri, Antonelli, and I know even though Piastri is a little bit older, but Piastri, Antonelli, and Bierman are kind of that next level, that next generation coming through. I think the Formula One's really in a good place right now with a lot of these, really good young drivers. Even Hadjar and Verstappen, same type of situation. Hadjar has shown his quality so far this year. So really those top four teams have drivers that are still young in the sense of not the Hamilton, the Alonso age, the mid to late 30s, but still young in their mid to late 20s. But then you have guys who are even younger than them that are showing their quality this year. And I think that in that sense we're in a pretty good spot in Formula One when it comes to the future, and racing and stuff.
Yeah, no, it'll be interesting to see kind of that in the next generation coming through, especially as, Max might be looking to get the hell out of here. And,
Exactly.
yeah, and then what happens to Russell if Antonelli actually wins the championship? Is he just like got skipped over? Because like in his head, and a lot of people tell you he's that same class as Max and Landa and Charles, and two of those guys have won championships already, and if he now gets the fastest car and still can't do it, what does that say about him?
Yeah, no, for sure.
Now, well, the drivers' championship is it's the drivers is competitive, but this is over.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not officially.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's still super early. This next month is going to be it's going to be really big for this, for the Constructors Championship. I think that there's a big opportunity for a lot of these teams to, go out and really make some differences on their cars and try to, at least get them to a point to where they're a little bit more competitive, or like we were talking about with rule changes, maybe they change something and they're able to develop their car a little bit in whatever direction they go. But man, Haas in fourth, wow,
I mean, this is
wow,
this is what we were talking about the Red Bull earlier. We haven't mentioned Hadjar a lot because that car sucks,
yeah,
and as much as Adrian Newey and this Austin Martin experiment has gone to shit, Red Bull's missing him. So it's like it's tanked two teams. He made a decision to try and run the other team, and obviously the Honda engine playing a big part in their struggles. But then also there's a vacuum of Red Bull in terms of design, and both those teams are. I would say a year ago at this time, if you had told us, this would be the standings, I think those are by far the two most disappointing teams. I don't think it's any accident that Adrian Newey's move was involved in both of those.
yeah. No, I agree fully. I'm the self-proclaimed Adrian Newey stand here on this show, but it's really kind of interesting to see how he hasn't really got a full grasp on this regulation set, and like I said, I want to see how it is.
The Honda engine is awful, right? So that's another part of it too. Like it's not really capable of running full speed for an entire race. So
yeah, but on top of that, they've been talking about they don't have the downforce, they don't have the grip, they don't have, they're not able to control the cars like how Max wants these cars to be, or like how Alonso wants these cars to be able to be controlled. And on top of that, they're overweight. You're not quite as overweight as the Williams cars are, but they are still overweight. So the fact of the matter is that Adrian Newey was or came out as the best designer, or has been touted as the best designer of Formula One race cars for the past 30 years, and this is not a good showing for him.
Nope, but again, it is early, and I think it's very hard to gauge the error when the engine is just not functional. I mean, it's
agreed.
All right, so to wrap up here, we did mention a couple of several of the drivers came out. Max has obviously been vocal about it. Lando also was talking about how it's impossible to overtake without getting overtaken because the drivers have no control over the battery deployment. What they do with the throttle automatically deploys the battery, or it goes to charging mode. So obviously the FIA has talked about potential changes, or they're allegedly looking into them. Because even, as they said, especially like even in qualifying, the cars can't go flat out. Because if you push in the wrong corner, if you put and actually this was something Leclerc talked about too. Just going around the wheel here, but he mentioned that one of the things he likes to do in qualifying is find the limit, push it, but the computer that deploys the battery is mapped how he's been driving and gets confused and deploys the battery in the wrong places and essentially ruins the lap. So he doesn't understand what's going on when he accelerates more in a corner than he has been to try and get a little bit more pace through it. It'll get totally confused, charge the battery, then it'll deploy. Because I guess one of the things I didn't realize, you probably knew this because you're definitely much more on the Prix than I am. I didn't realize they had zero control over the battery.
Yeah.
And I think that's where a lot of the complaints are coming. So I've run these past a couple of suggestions I've seen. One is to just don't allow the batteries to deploy as much energy. So actually slow that down, because what that'll do is it means less charging, less battery advantage when you have the battery, and it'll kind of normalize a little bit. So I think right now they can deploy 350 kilowatt hours or whatever the metric is. I'm talking about if they drop that down to about 200, it means the charging and deployment will then be transparent. You won't really even notice it. Thoughts on doing something like that?
I mean, if they do something like that, then in my opinion, they need to up the boost amount. They need to give them some more boost out of the turbos, allow them to run a little bit more, because half the problem is that what they're discussing in that sense is slowing the cars down. You get 350 kilowatts worth of power. That correlates to, about what, 250, 300 horsepower or something like that. I don't know the exact conversion, but, it converts to a certain amount of horsepower that's what they're, how they're making this speed. That's how they're going as fast as they're going. These cars are already slower than the previous generation. Now we're talking about making them even slower just to conserve battery. Now, come on, there's got to be a little bit of back and forth. You got to be able to give them a little bit more power, give them a little bit more, give them a little bit more pressure of boost or bar of boost or whatever it would be to be able to compensate for that, because these cars we want to see them be the fastest things on four wheels going around any given track. Right now, I think that there are prototype endurance cars that will go faster around a track than these Formula One cars are. I think if you compare the speed with the Ferrari 499X, the Ferrari car at Imola, they are a very similar pace at this point, or we'll see how similar the pace is when they go to Imola later on this year, because they have a WEC race there this year. So it's like I think one of those things is going to be, it has to go one with the other. One has to happen with the other. If they're going to take down a little bit of the energy usage, they got to give them more power on the ICE, because you don't want to lose any of the speed that these cars have already, because they're already going slower than what we want to see.
Yeah, I mean, so that was one of the options, and like you said, and this actually we nailed what one of the concerns was kind of slow the cars down generally. The other concern was, well, again, these teams looking for any advantage, and so if there's less power draw, they can scheme it so there's still as much lifting and coasting and all this, but actually the car goes like, it doesn't necessarily solve the problem depending on how they do the engine mappings. The other thing they talked about is, especially for qualifying, this would be an easy fix, is just turning up the power on the ICE so that there's less depends on batteries. Now, reason it's an easy fix for qualifying is you can just make it more fuel rich, consume more fuel, and the car will go faster when it's under the engine, and it'll become more dependent on the engine versus the battery, and then the battery advantage dissipates. Yeah. Now you can't really do that in a race because they'll run out of fuel, because they've designed these cars down to the exact millimetric specification. There's not extra space in the fuel tank to carry extra fuel, but for qualifying there is. Yeah. But yeah, so what would you think about doing something like just for qualifying like that, but leaving the rest of it alone? Because that was kind of one of the other suggestions.
I mean, that to me is just a Band-Aid. Realistically, they need to make an overhaul on these regulations to be able to, increase the performance, increase the excitement within these races, to where I like the thought process, like you said, about them knocking down how much battery power they can use, and the fuel usage thing. There's ways that they'll be able to adjust that, even if they let everybody go a little bit more. They'll still be able to balance it out in regards to lasting the whole race. That I'm not worried about that. Excuse me. I think that there needs, like I said, there needs to be a way that they can balance it out to where it still has, maybe a little bit more performance, but then they're not using as much of the battery. I think right now that 50-50 reliance was the wrong way to go, and they're starting to realize this. I mean, hell, you got Formula E starting to realize this. You got the director of Formula E, the guy who's in charge of that in the FIA, coming out and saying, you guys are starting to infringe on our department. You guys are starting to break into our, part of the FIA. We're the electric dependent racing series in the FIA right now, not you guys. So I think that there needs to be more emphasis on the ICE. They've gone to completely sustainable fuels. The new fuels that they have that they just went into. I mean, hell, they've been talking all week as well about going back to a V8. 2.4 liter V8, and running that whether with or without a turbo, and then with a small hybrid system, that just supplements, basically how it kind of was before, but even less, and reducing the size of the cars even more to go back, more to like the mid 2000 size cars, because you're able to not have such a big hybrid system in there and batteries that have to store so much. So, I think that those are all solutions that Formula One really needs to look into more, and consider, even if it means overhauling everything now and telling these manufacturers, I'm sorry, but this racing and this product that we're putting out isn't appealing to the fans. And Liberty Capital isn't people, or aren't a group that really cares about the teams as much as they care about the people. They care about the fans a lot more, and they've worked very hard to bring in a large segment of fans into Formula One. And ever since Liberty Media, I'm sorry, I don't know why I said Liberty. What did I say, Liberty Capital or something like that?
Yeah.
I got them. I got them and Dorrington Capital, the people who took over Williams. I got them mixed up. So Liberty Media has done a great job bringing in new fans to Formula One. They've done a great job of bringing in new fans to MotoGP now too, since they just took that over. That I think that they want to show the best racing possible, and they'll lean on the FIA to make whatever regulation changes needs to be made in order to make this product better.
Yeah, it's just hard to do it in here. So like you can't. So one of the issues, like full ass swapping the engines, like are they even gonna fit in the car? Like I mean, there's all these things.
It'd be smaller. It would be smaller.
Yeah, but then how's the rest of the aero gonna fit? Like, there's not a full. There's an unintended break right now because of the Middle East situation.
Yeah,
there's not trying to redo all these cars.
No, that I'm talking about more of a 2028, 2029, situation.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think that's a different conversation. Right?
Yeah,
if they're gonna, if we're talking about future years. For this year, there's not. That's why the people are talking about like screwing with the fuel up, like and stuff that's
fuel,
like,
turbo boost, stuff like that.
That's like software and not, because again, it's like they design these things down to the exact, millimeter, and just tweaking it a little bit. Like, okay, we got to change half the parts in this. So I don't know what the answer is short term. I think we're going to be dealing with this. There's only so much they can do, like you said, and you call this out in the first, proposal I laid out, which is there's only so much you can do, with the caveat that a lot of these things that we're talking about slow the cars down.
Yeah.
And they want to be the fastest car. They want to be the pinnacle of speed, which they are, even like this. Yeah. And so if you start doing things like, let's just reduce the battery, because that is the thing you can do. You can reduce the battery output and what's allowed to do, and it lessens the impact of the battery, which means the charging is lessened. It's just not as important. All the lifting and coasting, super clipping, all that crap will go away because you don't really need the battery that charge. And that will make the racing less dependent on it, which is what everyone wants. It'll also just slow the car down.
Yeah.
Period. And so a lot of these changes that you can do without a radical redesign of the actual cars, which you cannot do in a month in the middle of the season, they are going to slow the car down. So that's why people are kind of like, maybe we can somehow, put more fuel to the ICE, because you can do. I mean, that's how Ferrari cheated those years ago. When they tricked it, they fooled the sensors and were delivering more fuel to the engine. That's why their engine had all the power plant busted, and rather than get punished, they got to stop it. And they stopped, and all of a sudden the car and all of the Ferrari supplied cars were very slow.
Yep.
So, I mean, they could actually do something like that but transparently, not like tricking the regulations, but transparently just say, like, you're allowed to push more fuel to the engine and let the teams figure it out from there. And that's the only thing I've seen that would actually make the cars go faster.
Yeah.
that and make them less dependent on the charging of the battery.
Yeah. Well, I
But
mean, they
but who
got to
knows
do
how much
something.
these tanks can hold? Yeah, but who knows how much these tanks can really hold? Like,
I mean, I think
they
the
hold it
more
up.
Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc and maybe not George Russell so much because they're used to him whining, but the more you hear these other Fernando Alonso, the more you hear these guys complaining about this and threatening to leave, I think the quicker you're going to see that Formula One's going to make these changes. So I hope they keep up the pressure. I hope Liberty Media keeps up pressure on them as well because the FIA's got to do something here. Unless they plan on losing, I think that this regulation cycle could have the potential of losing them a good amount of the fans that they made up during COVID. We all know that COVID helped out Formula One when it came to fans because of Drive to Survive, because of everything that they brought in, whether it be the new drivers and all these people that everybody knows. I mean, there's more people that know more drivers' names for Formula One than there was 10 years ago. 2015, in 2015, you probably could find, three people that knew anything about Formula One. Now there's people that walk around in Formula One shirts every single day that, even in my line of work, I see them. I go, hey, are you yeah, I'm a Leclerc fan. Or, hey, yeah, I'm a Lewis Hamilton fan. Oh, do you watch? Yeah, I watch the races. Well, maybe not so more watch the races all the time because they're not on ESPN anymore. But people watch the races more. People enjoy the races more. And that's because of how good the product has been the past few years. Now the product is starting to go down a little bit. Now the product is starting to get a little bit worse. Is it just because it's the first year of a regulation change? Maybe. We saw that with McLaren in the first year of the last regulation change. That car was trash. By the end of the regulations, it was the best racing, that we've seen. And hopefully they can figure something out in this, regulation cycle that is going to make these cars better, and it'll get back to great racing.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think there's always, like you said, an opportunity for the teams to just get a better grip on this, and have it become transparent so you don't really see it. Yeah, the beginning and end of a generation of cars look very different from the beginning of this, but we'll see. They are allegedly looking at, especially for qualifying, some tweaks, which we will see in a month right here in our backyard. Evan, the next race is the Miami race at Hard Rock, May 1st to 3rd. So we're next up. It'll be for all these middle of the night races. We get it not just in our time zone, but just over there. So
maybe we plan a live stream from the race, or Facebook Live from the race.
Yeah. Let's see if I can get into the race. So let's start with that.
Hey, if it's gonna be a sprint race, I'm telling you, we had a great time at the sprint race. Me and Carly went a few years ago.
I believe it is I think it is a sprint race. Yeah, no, it's a sprint. It is practice, then sprint qualifying, and the race.
Me and Carly went to the sprint race, and we had a great time. And I'm sure you could get us. You could get us in parking and everything there because you know that place like the back of your hand.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the parking is the track.
Yeah, this is true. This is true.
When I normally go there. In fact, tell Max to get his ass off my parking spot. Damn it! Tell him he can drive through there.
There you go.
But anyway, yeah. So we'll be back. We'll be back obviously before. I don't know if we're gonna do a show next week, definitively. But obviously, if some big rule change comes out, so we'll definitely do a show. Otherwise, we'll obviously do a show at least one before the Miami GP to preview it. So stay tuned for that as there's a lot of fluid stuff going on right now because all of a sudden there's a gap in the middle of the season and there's issues with the car design. So those two things are coming together to make it a bit uncertain on exactly what's going to show up here.
Oh, yeah.
Circus comes to town. But we'll be back. Thanks everyone for joining. I'm doing this all late night. I was out of baseball, so this is when I could do it. Evan, thanks for hanging out late with me.
Always.
All right, everyone. We'll be back in sometime in the next few weeks, and see you then.
Bye, guys.